words, and that would be my luck. All right, so the 4 processors, and this actually is in one of the documents that I loaded onto your Canvas course. Orthographic is responsible for, perceiving the sequences of letters in text. It's where you're actually seeing the letters. It's heavily influenced, or it is, phonics. Phonological is responsible for mapping the letters and their spoken equivalent. So phonological, you're hearing the letters. That processor is engaged when you're reading. Meaning contains one's knowledge of the word meanings. Back to what James was talking about, the schema in the brain. You already have schema for dog, for example. When you read something about a dog, you're activating that schema in your brain. So that's your meaning processor. And then context is responsible for constructing the continuing understanding of the text. So if I'm reading a sentence but I don't know the context in which it's placed in, I don't know how to interpret it. So context is one of the 4 important processors when you're reading. So again, your orthographic, your phonological, your meaning, and your context all come together, all 4 processors, when you are learning to read. That is why it is not a natural event in your brain. It's not something that your brain will automatically do without formal instruction or formal coaching. So which one of these 4 processors do you think would limited experiences and or background knowledge impact? So if I come into the classroom and I have limited experiences, I haven't been read to, or I have limited background knowledge on that content, which one is it going to impact and why?
I think phonological. That's what I was thinking, phonological.
But then again,
Because they don't understand
they
how
don't
to.
know it.
If you've not had that structure and you don't know how to sound out these words or anything. So
Yeah.
I mean, and even how they're placed, how a word, like for the word cat, it's C-A-T. Well, if they don't know how to sound if they don't know the phonic, how to say the letter, then it's just something on a page. To them, they're like, so I think it would have, definitely, orthographic and phonological.
Okay. What about meaning and context?
If you don't,
Well, if you don't understand the
Yeah.
meaning, that some have multiple meanings, you could be just.
right?
You could read cat on a page, but if you've not seen a cat,
Right.
you've not experienced a cat, you don't know what that is.
Exactly.
Just some little.
It was a trick question. It impacts all of them, all 4 of them. Okay.
Yeah, and if you've not seen a cat, you wouldn't know a cat's an animal.
You would?
Right.
I mean, a cat? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
And a lot of our kids are reading stories where they don't have the background. I will never forget in a Basil series when I was in 1st grade teaching, we had a Basil series, Thomas's Snowsuit. We live in Knoxville, Tennessee. Our kids have never had a snowsuit. They might have had an inch of snow on a really good day, but they've never had a snowsuit before. They had no context, and so they were trying to sound out these words. They were using their phonics, but because they had no meaning and no context, like it did not make sense to them what I think it was Robert Munches who writes the book, but anyway, it didn't make sense to them at all. It wasn't even funny, and it's supposed to be a humorous text, but it really wasn't because they didn't have the context. So I had to bring in my nephew and niece live in Rochester, New York, and they had a snowsuit, so I asked them to send me one, and I brought it in, and I let them try it on, and all of a sudden the book was funny to them, but it wasn't before.
right.
So it's actually all 4 of them. This is what it looks like in your book, but I wanted to give you kind of the background of what all 4 of those mean and what they are and how they interact. It is figure 1.1 in my book, so I'm not sure if you'll look at your index with your new edition. I'm not sure where it's going to show the figure. And you don't really have to have it with me telling you, but just know that they interact together. None of these are in isolation. They all have to be activated in order to read. All right, so the elements of the literacy block, according to the Tennessee Department of Education, you've got in that 90 minutes that if you were listening to Janet when she was talking about you going in to do the classroom observations by state law, you have to have a minimum of 90 minutes of instruction in reading, which is good. You should have that. And what you do in that 90 minutes is not all one thing. You need to have a reading block, a writing block, explicit and systematic foundational skills instruction. A lot of times this is phonemic awareness or phonics, depending on which grade level you're in, and a speaking and listening component. So this is actually put in your Canvas course under your resources and tools. I put it under week 1. But these are the elements that need to be happening in your 90-minute literacy block every day. Within the reading, you've got interactive read aloud, shared reading, small group reading, and independent reading, and reading conferences. Now, you may have independent reading for one of your small groups today and another tomorrow, and by the end of the week you have reading conferences. So independent reading and reading conferences don't happen every day, but you need to have at least something going on with independent reading within the 90-minute block. And it may be one of your groups as they transition around, but it needs to be happening. So just know that that's, each of these things need to happen, but it may not be every day. The other thing to know about this model is that it is a release of responsibility model. And again, a diagram is one of the best ways that I can explain this. So this is a release of responsibility model. If you think about the teacher right here, and you think about the student right here, when a student is first learning something, the teacher has to model it. The teacher is taking a lot of responsibility for that skill or that knowledge, that piece of knowledge. As the student starts to learn and gets more confident over time, see if I can get that, over time, they take on more responsibility and the teacher takes more of a back seat being a facilitator or the coach, if you will. So let me explain it as far as riding a bike. So if you've been around little kids, you've seen a child start to ride a bike, one of the first things they have to do is see somebody else riding the bike, right? And then at a certain point, you've got your kids on the bike, right? But you have training wheels. And you as the parent are doing what? Where are you?
Right beside them.
Right beside them, right? You're holding on to the handlebars. You're making sure, even though it has training wheels, you're making sure that nothing happens to spook that child, right? At a certain point, though, maybe they take the training wheels off, or maybe they still have the training wheels, but you're walking behind them because they're confident enough that all they're doing, they're taking more responsibility for it, and all you're doing is just being around to make sure that nothing goes wrong, if you will. Then at a certain point, they actually take off and they're riding the bike without you. You might be even sitting in a lawn chair just watching them. All right, so that's the release of responsibility. The student, you as the teacher take less and less active role as the student takes more and more of an active role. I could do the bikes up here as well, but you get what I'm talking about with this. So let's apply this back over here. So for writing, for example, modeled writing, I'm showing kids, I'm modeling for them what the writing that I'm targeting is looking like. So I'm modeling that for them. I'm taking a heavy role, an active role in the writing. at that point. Move over to shared and interactive writing, and that's when the kids are writing with me. Maybe they're telling me what to write, and I'm saying, let's sound that out. What letter would I put first? So they're giving me some of the information that I need to use to put up there, so I'm taking less of an active role, and the kids are taking more of an active role. Small group writing, that's when they're actually starting to practice and I'm watching them do it. So they're putting whatever it is that we were modeling and then using the skill in shared and interactive writing, they're now applying it, but in a small group where I'm watching them actually apply it so that I can immediately help whenever they start to struggle or have some difficulty. And then independent writing and writing conferences, that's when the child has taken the bike and they're writing on their own, except it's now with a pen instead of a bike. And the writing conferences, I'm just saying, let's look at your writing. Let's look at it compared to the rubric. Where do you think you failed? What do you think your goal is going to be next time? So these are not just activities. I wanted you to be able to see through the lens of this is a release of responsibility from the teacher having the most active part to the teacher having the least active part. That is why these components need to be in the 90-minute block. Because over time, you're going to release it completely to the students when you use this model. Does that make sense? Where did I put my clicker?
So the reading and
Right
writing
there.
both take
On
place
the
in the
stand.
90-minute
Oh,
block?
thank you. Yes,
Okay,
they do.
okay.
That's a great question. Yes. And also your explicit and systematic skills instruction. Now, a lot of times, whatever foundational skills that I'm working on right here is what I'm going to model in